actually worked. Okay, so Tunisian, I started a project just so you could see. You will put all of your, loops on the hook. So you'll just pick them up as you go across, and then you will work them back off at the end of the row. So you'll pick them up, go all the way to the end, and then work them off. And we will actually work through this together so you can see how it's done. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. With one of these hooks, this is not very big. It's the same size as a straight hook. You could actually make an entire baby blanket with this. You would pick up all the hooks and you would just push all the loops down and you can go as tight as you have to. And as this gets bigger, it will bunch up, but it won't matter because as you take it off, it will loosen back up and you will have the room that you need. So don't worry. You start to get into full-size Afghans and you need a longer cable. But for those that really get into this and that are interested, I have this. This is interchangeable hooks, and it is it comes with all different loop sizes, the hook sizes. You can it comes with attachments so you can extend them and make them bigger, and it comes with all the different. I saved for this. This was a gift to myself when I passed the CGOA master class. I bought this for myself. It's a good investment if you really like Tunisian crochet, just so you can keep that in mind. Okay, so the concept is you would want to go up 2 hook sizes. That's average. I just want to show you a few swatches. So this is the swatch I had showed you. This is probably the most basic Tunisian stitch. It's called the Tunisian simple stitch. And this is, in my opinion, the worst stitch for curling. It curls no matter what you do. So this is 1 hook size bigger than what the yarn called for. This was 2 hook size. Oops, that wasn't the right one. I'm sorry. This is 2 hook sizes. And while it still curls, it doesn't curl nearly as much. And a lot of it you can flatten out as you work it, or when you're done your project, you can work a single crochet into the border and that will flatten it out. One thing that will help with curling is to work in that back ridge. So when you do your beginning chain, you get that little ridge in the back. If you work into that will help. It doesn't get rid of the problem, but it will help. If you really cannot stand the curling, which drives me crazy sometimes, these are other stitches you can do. This is the swatch I made for the cowl. It didn't curl at all. And it's because I started with a different stitch. This is another stitch that's very popular. This is the purl stitch, and it actually looks just like the knit purl in knitting, and it doesn't curl. So if you wanted to use the stitch we did the cowl with, or if you wanted to use a simple stitch, you could always do 1 row of this first, and that will help with the curling. And then you could go into this and you wouldn't get that curl at the bottom quite as much. Okay, so there are options. Sometimes the curling is unavoidable. This is just, there's nothing you can do about it. You could block it. That's another way. As long as you use the right hook size, try going up a hook size, go in the back ridge. If it's still curling a little bit like this and it's something you don't want to border with, I would definitely block it if this would drive you crazy. If it's a scarf, it might not be too bad. I wouldn't want a sweater like that. Okay, so that is my tip for curling. If those don't work, I would say always start with just 1 row of a different stitch, and that will solve the problem pretty much permanently. You won't have, the simple stitch is the worst for that. The next thing I wanted to say is the Tunisian each row is made up of 2 steps. Your forward pass is when you take this and you pick up all these loops along the way and you put them on your hook. That's called the forward pass. And then the return pass is when you take them and pull them all back off. This pattern that I did the cowl in, and most patterns will have you do a chain 1 at the end of the row, at the end of your forward pass, or at the beginning of your return pass, and then everything is pulled off in twos. So, and I will get to that when I show you, but that chain one is actually just, it's almost like the chain one of a single crochet row. You're bringing your hook up to that height. So usually if it's like something made in the round, they will skip that chain one at the beginning of the return pass. Let's see, what other tips do I have? I have one other really fun tip that I learned over the years. If you look at this swatch, do you see how it's longer on the right side? You're not doing anything wrong. This is because when you put all these loops on the hook, this just tends to stretch more than this side. And no matter how consistent you are, I try and be very consistent, this is still a problem. It ends up longer in this corner. This I purposely did without trying to get it even, just so that you could see the issue better. This one, I tried a little harder, and it's not obvious at all. There is a fix if this is driving you crazy and you're trying to be consistent and you can't. What you can do is on this first loop, here I'm going to take this apart so I can show you. On this first loop, you would drop this loop, and I forgot a stitch marker, but you would drop that and you would put a stitch marker in there and just leave it be and not do anything with it, and leave the stitch marker there and proceed to do the entire row without that one stitch. So you would start to pick up in the second, in the second stitch, and you would work across, and I'll get to the different stitches and show you in a minute. And you would leave this here, and when you get back to it and you work everything off, what you would do is you would drop this from the hook and you would put your hook back through this, pick the one you dropped back off and pull it through, and that will keep that stitch tighter so that you won't have this, this angle to it. My angles aren't too bad over the years. I've gotten better. Sometimes if it's something that I just can't get it straight across, I will use a stitch marker like maybe every other row or every fifth row, just to bring this back in just a little bit to keep it more rectangle, square, whatever shape you're going for. So those are some basic tips on, how to work things. What I want to do is I want to start this cowl, which I used this stitch just so you could see a smaller swatch. This is the stitch that I did the cowl in, and I will have a code at the end if you want to download the PDF of this free for watching the video. I will leave you, actually I will give it to you now so I don't forget. It's capital S, capital P, and then the number 3 for Sweet Potato 3. And that code is good on Ravelry. You can go and download the PDF and it will not charge you. It'll take the price off for watching this video. Okay, so I'm going to work this swatch so you can kind of see how to do the cowl. And I have a couple other standard tips that it's just easier to show you. So I'm going to just put a slip knot on, and I'm going to start, you're just going to do a chain like you would any project. So I'm just going to start with 12 just because it'll give you a good idea what it looks like, and it won't be too small. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so you have your beginning 12. You are not going to, you're going to skip one, I'm sorry. You're going to skip the first one like you would if it was the beginning of a row. So you're going to go into that back ridge. Remember we had talked about that'll prevent a little bit of the curling. So you have your V's on the front side of the beginning chain. If you flip that over, you get these little bumps. Most patterns will call them ridges. You're going to go in, work into that, and you're just going to insert the hook, and you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and you're going to leave it there. You're not going to take it off. You're not going to finish the stitch. It's almost like, you know, when you're doing a reduction, you know, when you're reducing a stitch or whatever. Okay, so you're going to leave that on the hook. You're not going to finish the stitch off. And then you're going to do that all the way across. So you're just going to insert the hook into that back ridge on every single one, and you're going to pull up a loop. And again, the yarn I'm using, I went up 2 hook sizes, just as a reminder. That's a good place to start. I think in the beginning, the first few projects I made, because I tend to be a tight crocheter, I may have gone up 3. So if you're using, you know, like a smaller yarn, like a DK yarn, I would definitely recommend trying 3 hook sizes up just till you get a feel for it. It'll be a good judge. Okay, so now you have all of your loops on the hook. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. This particular pattern needs an even number of stitches. Some of them don't, like the simple stitch, the purl stitch, the knit stitch. You can do any number of stitches and it just doesn't matter. So for this one, we need an even number. Sorry about that. Okay, now this is what I was talking about. To take them off, it's called a return pass. So for this pattern, and most patterns, unless it's specified otherwise, your very first thing you're going to do is you're going to yarn over and you're going to pull through 1 loop. And that's kind of the equivalent of that beginning chain. If you were working a regular row, you'd be over here and you would do like a chain 1 so that your hook would be up to the height so you could do single crochets all the way across. So that's kind of what that is. It's just bringing it up so that you'll have that, the stitch will be the same height on the next row. And then you're going to yarn over and you're going to pull off 2 all the way across. Sometimes it's easier to bunch them up, and you're going to yarn over and then you're going to pull through 2 and you're going to pull the hook up. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2, and you're going to do that all the way across. Sometimes it's easier in the beginning just to hold the stitches still until your project has a little bit of mass to it so that it doesn't slide around as easy. And so you're going to just keep doing that. You're going to yarn over, pull through 2 all the way across. Looneyville. I don't know where that is, but it sounds fun. Okay, so that is your first row. So you had the forward pass, you had the return pass, and you're back to the beginning. Okay, all first rows work that way, that it's not really part of the pattern. You just need to have something to work into. Most stitches will work into these vertical bars somehow. Some will go between them, some will go in front of them, behind them. Sometimes you'll use this horizontal bar at the top. You just have to pay attention to what you're doing. For this pattern, we will just be using these vertical bars. Okay, tip number 1, do not work into this first stitch that's under the loop on the hook. This is your end stitch, and see how it's already bigger than it's just loosened up already. But that's okay. For this, it just doesn't matter. But that's where you would want that stitch marker to hold it so it doesn't stretch out. So we're going to skip this one, and we're going to work, you're going to put the hook in behind that first vertical bar. And then you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And just, I would kind of, especially in the beginning, pull it up and make sure it's the same height. That way, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, that's called a Tunisian simple stitch. TSS is how you'll see it listed a lot, and that's what this is. It's called the simple stitch. Okay, now this pattern was worked in the honeycomb. which is, it's called a simple stitch. It's called the simple stitch and the purl stitch, and they alternate. So we did the simple stitch, now we're going to do the purl stitch. It's almost identical. The only difference is now you're going to take this yarn and you're going to put it in front of your hook. And then, but you will go through, you'll go behind the vertical bar the same exact way, but your yarn will be in front. And then you're going to wrap it and pull it through like you did the other one. But so you can see how it's slightly different. It just kind of creates like a little twist there. So we had the simple stitch and the purl stitch, and you're going to do that all the way across to the last one. So we'll do a simple stitch where you insert behind the vertical bar and you yarn over and you pull up a loop, and then that purl stitch you'll go in front, and then you'll insert it into the vertical bar, and then you can yarn over like that and pull it through. And I hope you can see that. It's kind of hard to see what you see and crochet at the same time. So you're going to do the simple stitch, and then you'll do the purl stitch, which is put it in front and insert it behind the vertical bar, and then you're going to take it and you're going to wrap it from the back to the front. So you need to get it to the back again. You don't want to wrap it front to back. That will not create the same look. You'll want to get it to the back again and then wrap it to the front. All right, so we have a couple more. I'll do a simple stitch and then a purl stitch. Ah! And if you drop it, you can just put them back on. It's not as hard as knitting. And if you ever need to see where you left off, if you have to pull something off, if you messed up, like I just messed up there, I'll show you. A simple stitch is always just that vertical, that straight vertical bar. You'll see nothing else. Whereas the purl stitch has the little knot. Simple stitch doesn't, it just has that vertical bar. So the next one would be a purl stitch. And then I'm going to do two more, and then I will be at the last stitch, and I want to show you another trick. Okay, this is the best trick I think I've ever learned. You get to the end, most people would be tempted to go through that vertical bar again, like you have been. I'm going to say don't do it. If you turn it sideways, and here I'm going to show you what it looks like. If you turn it sideways, if you work through both of them, you get a finished edge. So it's upside down, your stitches look upside down, but you don't have to actually put a border on there if you don't want to. You can just have a nice finished edge. Here, let me turn it this way so you can see it a little better. You can have a nice finished edge without having to put a border on it. So to do that, you're going to take your hook. You can, and if it's weird the way you're holding it, just scrunch this up so you can turn the hook better. And you're going to go through both of those bars at the end, not just the vertical one that you would have been doing in the stitch. Go through the back one also, and yarn over and pull up your loop. And I have a tendency of pulling this last loop really, really tight. I don't know why, I just do. And that creates some of this tightness. So you want to really tug on it, not tug on it, but make sure that your stitches are even all the way across and level. And that will help this side not look so bad if this side isn't too tight. And like I said, I purposely did this one not thinking. I just did it really fast, which is why this side's scrunched and this side's really long. But I wanted you to see what would happen, and it is correctable. It's not too bad. Okay, so we have all the loops on the hook. We're gonna take these off. We're gonna do the return pass. So we're gonna yarn over and pull through one, and that brings up that loop. And then you're gonna yarn over and pull through two, and you're gonna do that all the way across. Okay, and we are back at the end. And this does not stay open at the end. You do a bind off row, which I can show you when we get that far. So then your next row, you're going to use the same stitches. You're going to use the simple stitch and you're going to use the purl stitch, but you're going to start with the opposite one. So this row 1, we did simple stitch, purl stitch all the way across. So row 2, we're going to do purl stitch, simple stitch. So to start with the purl, you would put the yarn in front. And you're, like I said, you're going to skip this first bar. And so you're going to actually start working in the second stitch. And you're going to do the purl stitch in that one. And then you're going to do the simple stitch. So essentially you're doing the purl stitch over the simple stitch and the simple stitch over the purl stitch. You're reversing them, which is what gives it that honeycomb pattern. And you work that across. So you're going to work the purl stitch and the simple stitch. And if you ever are unsure where, like if I walked away and put this down, I'd have to come back and be like, oh, what was the last stitch I did? So there's a couple ways to tell. One, you can look at the one below it, and just this plain vertical bar means it was a simple stitch, so you would know to do a purl stitch in it. That's really the easiest way. You can pull it off and see where the yarn came from, or like you can look here and see this was a purl stitch because it has a little twist in it. There's a couple different ways of looking. I find it easy to find that simple stitch. And if they both kind of look like a simple stitch, but this one has that twist at the base. And this one doesn't. It would just have that bar underneath it. So this one would be a purl. This one would be a simple stitch. Now we're to the end of row 2, the forward pass. Now we had the chain 1 that we did, and then we had this. So the easiest way to remember this is the chain 1 is what you want to work into. This piece right here actually matches all these other ones that are between the stitches, and that's actually part of the horizontal row. So you don't want to work into this one, you want to work into that side one. And you're going to put the hook through both again, yarn over and pull up a loop. And just make sure you're not pulling too tight on this end one. Okay? And you're going to work that across. And you're going to rotate those 2 rows. I think there ended up being 28 rows in the cowl. If you found a skein of 3.5 ounce yarn that you absolutely loved, I would highly recommend you just cut it short a few rows. So the way the pattern is written, it needs to end on a row 4. So take off 2 rows at a time. If you're running out of yarn, take off, end at row 26 or row 24, just so that you can read the final bind off row. Okay, so you're just going to alternate that all the way up. And I know some people were worried about too much time, so I'm not going to repeat those rows, but what I am going to do is I'm going to show you the bind off row. You don't want this open row left. It's kind of holy, and it doesn't give it a finished look. So somehow we need to close this. So there's tons of different bind offs in Tunisian. The most common is either just to do a slip stitch or just to do a single crochet. I tried both for this and I did not like the way they looked because there's such a pattern to this that if I just did slip stitch all the way across, it did not match up with how this pattern laid out. So what I did was I kind of came up with my own bind off, and I used a slip stitch method, but the slip stitch method I used matches what I did for the pattern. So we ended with a, so I would need to do one more row of the next one to make this work. So I'm actually gonna do one more row, because you would have to 1, 2, oh no, wait, that's row 2, 1, 2, okay, sorry about that. So I had to think that through for a second. So you're going to insert the hook behind the vertical bar. You're gonna yarn over, and you are going to slip stitch through. So in essence, you're doing a slip stitch. You're just matching it to the stitch. So the next one should be a purl stitch. So I'm going to put the yarn in front. I'm going to insert it behind the vertical bar, and then I'm going to go behind it, and then I'm going to do my slip stitch. So I'm matching this next stitch that it should have been, but instead of picking it up on putting them all on the hook, I'm just taking them off the same time I do them. So I'm going to do the simple stitch, slip stitch. It's a tongue twister. And then sorry, you can't see that. And then I'm going to do the purl stitch. So you're just going to pull it through like you would a slip stitch. So I'm going to do a simple stitch, slip stitch, and then the purl stitch, which is, remember, put the yarn in front and then insert it behind the vertical bar. And then you're going to yarn over, and then you're going to pull it through both of those as a slip stitch. And you can do this in single crochet. I just found when I did it in this pattern, the single crochet was really prominent. So like what happened was here, it looked like I had tried to finish it off, and then it looked like there was another row of single crochet, and I didn't want that. I just wanted you to be able to see that this creates a really nice border. You don't really have to do anything. Like if you wanted to do a washcloth or something to practice, you have your top finish, the bind off row, which is very finished. And you have, because we worked in the back ridge, you have your first row that's very finished. And then we worked through the side. So it's got that finished look on the side. And then it's got the finished look on the side. So you really, if you do it this way, you don't even really need a border on the, something like this. So I just wanted to kind of give you the most basic way you can actually do these, and they look so nice. Okay, let's finish this off. So just do your slip stitch, and then I know this is a very small swatch. Okay, and then you're going to get to the end, and you're going to go through those 2 vertical bars, and you're going to slip stitch. And then you can fasten off like you would. And if you wanted to do something small like this, just practice it in multiples of 2 for this particular stitch. Does anybody have any questions on anything that maybe I didn't cover? I'm just looking through my notes to make sure I got all my little tips and tricks that I have found. I can type up a quick reference list if you want of things that you might want to remember, like going through the last 2 loops in the back, or starting with 2 hook sizes larger, as a general rule of thumb. Sometimes even 3. Using your stitch marker in this corner stitch so that it doesn't get too big. If that would help anybody, I can do that. Does anybody have any questions? No? All right, I will wait 1 second because I'm hoping that I'm not missing any. I don't think I'm missing them, but I had to have my laptop up so I could see what I was doing. So I'll show you a couple stitches just to make sure nobody has any questions before I turn the video off. This is a knit stitch, which looks exactly like a knit stitch. If you knit, you will recognize this, and that's why they named it that. And this is the other thing I wanted to show you that I did not show you earlier. This is Tunisian. The main difference, and some of the stitches are so identical, it's amazing to me. And if you already love crochet and you have no desire to learn to knit, this is perfect. Here's the major difference. If you flip this over, it is not two-sided. That is not attractive. There, it's not the knit stitch, and it's not like that with just that stitch. They're all like that. This is the honeycomb stitch we were working on, and if you flip that over, it's not. This is the closest one. This one is the purl stitch, which again, there's a, the knit purl. And if you flip that over, it's fairly close. That's probably the closest one. This is the Tunisian simple stitch, which is probably the most popular stitch. And again, you flip it over and it's not very attractive on the other side. So that's a general rule of thumb. It is not a double-sided, it's not a double-sided stitch. So whatever you're going to want, you're going to make sure it's not something you want, like I did a blanket for my daughter. If you go on my website, there's a free, it's called the Vineyard Throw. And it requires a very large hook. I think it was like a P or a Q, and I had to get a cable hook for it. And I held 2 strands of number 6 together to make it, because she wanted like a really heavy blanket. She's always cold. And it came out amazing. It's definitely one-sided, but with, striped fabric or whatever, it doesn't matter too much. So that's the biggest difference, is just make sure you're not making something. If you wanted a sweater, I have a sweater I made. It's just not, cardigan might be a little harder. You might want to make sure it's something you're not, you're buttoning, or, even if it lays flat, that's fine. But just be aware, it's not a double-sided fabric, but it doesn't matter. You can do so many creative stitches with this. It's really fun, and it's different. And, you can just, it broadens your horizons on crochet, and you can add so much more to what you can do. Okay, it doesn't look like anybody has any questions, so I will end it. Again, if you go to my Ravelry, I will leave a link in the comments to the pattern, and use SP3, and you can get the pattern as a free download. I will leave that code open. I think I have it programmed until Saturday or Sunday, for anybody that's going to watch this as a replay. If you have any questions, if you're struggling, please tag me in the group, and I will do my best to help you through it. It's very different, because if you are like me and you hold your hook like a pencil, it's definitely awkward to learn how to hold this. Again, if you can hold your stitches still from sliding around in the beginning, that helps. If you want to make something bigger, just push them down. And if anybody wants all those like little tips typed up on a PDF or whatever, I can do that, and we can add the file to Christine's group. But again, tag me if you have any questions, and I would love to see your cowls, because if you use a striped yarn, or if you use any kind of ombre yarn, as long as it's more striped and not something speckled, you'll lose this honeycomb stitch pattern. But stripes come out amazing in this stitch, because sometimes the forward pass will be one color and the return pass will be another. So these vertical bars will come out a different color than the yarn behind it, and it looks really, really nice. So you can get some really cool effects with this, with Tunisian crochet. I just would stay away from anything where the color changes like maybe every 2 stitches or something like that, because then you'll lose all of this design. And again, have any questions, let me know. All right, thank you so much for letting me come in and teach you, and I would love to do it again sometime. Talk to you later.